And no, this is real. It can actually cause your testicles to shrink. Yes, but statistically, there's a high chance that you could end up with fertility issues if you are engaged in any of these things I've mentioned.
In today's video, we're going to address male fertility, and specifically, as the title implies, we'll be talking about mistakes men make that kill your sperm. Now, if you're a guy who wants to have children in future, you know these are mistakes you cannot afford to make at all. And so joining me on the show today, as usual, I have Dr. Kelvin Owusu, and he's poised to jump into it. Aren't you, Kelvin? Good to see you.
I am. It's always good to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Awesome. So let's get into it. I mean, we won't waste too much time. Let's talk a little bit about male fertility and perhaps all the problems that can arise, when you consider it. When you talk about male fertility, does it just mean, like, for instance, how viable a man's sperm is, or are there other components that bring the whole equation together?
Well, I mean, the sperm is the ultimate. I mean, if the sperms are in good, first of all, the number of sperm, there needs to be there's a minimum number that's required. Then the quality of the sperm. I mean, are the sperms, do they have double heads or double tails? Are they swimming forward or they are swimming in circles? They have to be single-headed, single tail, and they must swim in a straight line towards a goal. You see, men are goal-oriented, so our sperm must also, go towards a goal. Otherwise, they are useless. So those are the things. When we talk about semen analysis, we are looking at the number in terms of the quantity. We are looking at the direction they move. We are looking at their shape, and their what's it called? Their shape and how normal they are looking. So all those are important. So if you don't have normal functioning sperms, then you struggle to achieve pregnancy, or you struggle to impregnate your partner. But when you talk about fertility, go on.
Don't jump too far ahead just yet, because some of us are hearing this for the first time. So let me be sure and let me be clear. Sperms, as you said, should have, did you say one head?
Yes, one head and one tail.
Okay. So that is to mean that there's some that come out abnormally.
Yes. I mean, so you have to understand that the number of sperm that are produced at a time is a lot. I mean, in about 2 mil of semen, we are looking at about, not less than 5 million sperms in there. So yes. So when you are doing anything, when you are mass producing anything, the risk of errors are also high. And so it goes without saying that you might find some sperm that do not meet the quality requirements. And indeed, these sperm, the body kind of has a way of getting rid of these sperms, you see, because once they are double-headed or they are double-tailed, they tend not to be able to swim well. And so because they can't swim well, they are left behind, So if you do a semen analysis and then majority of your sperms are not able to swim properly, then you have a problem, Almost every man will have some sperm that are abnormal. That's okay. But how many of the sperms are abnormal? That's where the issue is.
Right. And what causes this anomaly, if I may ask?
Well, I mean, the first thing is, they are mass producing the sperms. Your testicles are working overdrive all the time. So it goes without saying that there will be some manufacturer defect. So that's the first thing. And then some of the things you're going to discuss later on can also contribute to your sperm becoming predominantly abnormal or otherwise, you see. So some factors contribute.
Okay, great. So, I mean, without wasting too much time, let's jump into it. What are some of the, mistakes that men are making that affect the viability of their sperm?
Well, I mean, so there are quite a lot of things. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call them mistakes per se, but there are issues or there are habits or things that some men do that predispose them to having challenges later on. Now, I mentioned that when it comes to fertility is not just about the sperm. It's a whole combination of factors. So you have your hormones coming into play. You have the patency of your tubes, because from the testicle is the manufacturing center. From the testicle, you have the tubes that connect the testicle to the outside world, and you have the prostate gland feeding into these tubes. You have other seminal vesicles also feeding into these tubes. All these things need to be normal for you to have normal semen. So if there's a defect in any of these stages, it can cause you problems. Now, I'm stressing on this because some of the issues would affect various or different aspects of the male reproductive organ, or the male reproductive system, and that can eventually then lead to you having challenges. So one of the key things, for instance, let's start with the most common cause of fertility issues. Stress.
Well, I'm not surprised.
Yes, prolonged persistent stress, it can cause problems. And one of the problems it can cause is indeed fertility issues for a man. You see, I know your audience is quite diverse, quite international, but from where we come from, oftentimes fertility issues are placed at the foot of the woman. The women get blamed a lot for fertility issues, but men actually contribute almost equal measure of fertility issues. So in medicine, we actually divide them into three. We have male fertility, male factor fertility issues, and female factor fertility issue. And for the male, it's 30%. For the female, it's 30%, and the remaining 40% is a combination of either or both.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
And so stress, one of the common causes. Now, how stress does this is that when you are consistently under pressure, when you're consistently stressed, your body responds by producing the stress hormones. That's adrenaline, noradrenaline, or better known as epinephrine, norepinephrine, and these are your fight or flight response hormones. And so whenever they are engaged, your frame of mind or your body is positioned to flee or to fight. Now think about it. If you're about to flee or you're about to fight, who cares about your reproductive capabilities? So these hormones suppress fertility because you need all your energy to fight or to run away. And so if it's prolonged for a long time, it can result in significant hormonal imbalance where your sex hormones are no longer at the optimum levels, and so which is why when you are investigating, when you are doing anything to help people to conceive, one of the first things you try to get them to do is to take their mind off the very issue for which they are in front of you. I know it's difficult, but it helps because just by doing that alone, you can actually reverse some of the damage in quotes and then get some good results. So that's the first one, and I dare say one of the easier ones to actually handle.
Okay. All right. What's the second? I'm curious now.
Well, now then we come into what I'll typically call a mistake, like you rightly said in the title, which is where men wear a lot of tight-fitting clothing, underwear for that matter. Now, there's a reason why the testes hangs outside the body, and that is because the testes require a lower temperature than the body temperature. It requires about a degree less of temperature. So if your normal body temperature is, let's say, 35, 36, whatever your normal body temperature is, your testicles actually require a degree less. And so by hanging outside, it allows for air to circulate around the testicles and then keep it cool so that it can function optimally. So when you wear clothing that now force the testicles back into the body or pushes the testes up into the groin, you now make it assume the body temperature, and that would reduce the optimum environment that the testicles need to function. And so if this happens all the time, like prolonged wearing of tight-fitting clothes, you could end up with problems. So if you're a person who is always typically wearing tights, skinny jeans, tight underwears, boxers, especially in the night, you wear it to sleep, that's too much of a problem for the testicles. So you might have issues later on. Now I stress on might because we are also dealing with statistics. So statistically, men who wear tight-fitting underwears tend to struggle with fertility issues. It does not mean that all men who wear tight-fitting underwear will have fertility issues, but that point must be clearly established that statistically it's a significant issue. And along the same, even though this particular one I've described is a choice, you chose to wear those tight-fitting clothes. But there are some situations where there's a medical condition for which the body and the temperature inside the testicles is increasing. Some of the conditions include something we call a varicocele or a hydrocele. They are not the same. Hydrocele is a collection of water or fluid in the testicles. The testicular sac. This could be because of one defect or another. When you have fluid in there, it increases the temperature because there shouldn't be any fluid there. So that's a hydrocele. Then you have a situation where there's a varicocele, which is a dilatation of the veins. There are a lot of veins in the testicular sac, but these veins become engorged, so there's blood pooling inside the veins, and that also can increase the temperature in the testes. So these two situations can again cause you problems, especially if you leave it there for a long time. Men are generally terrible at taking care of themselves. I mean, this point has to be clearly established. So guys, you need to get your act together. When it comes to healthcare, guys are terrible. In fact, in my practice, most men would come into your hospital and my consultant and tell me that my wife said I should come. So they didn't feel like coming. It's somebody that had to push them to come. And it's very typical of men. You see, so a lot of men may have these issues, but they've ignored it. If you ignore it for long enough, you could end up with fertility issues, because it means that the temperature of the testis has been raised for a very long time. Then there's also another one, still a medical condition, called hernia, where intestinal, what's it called? Should I say intestinal content or abdominal content? Yes, which could be intestine, could be fat, could be other contents from the abdomen, can end up in the scrotum. That can also cause a significant rise in temperature. So if you leave it there for a long time, it could cause you problems. So on the temperature side, these are some of the obvious happenings. Of course, there are also men who work in high heat areas. So for instance, men who work in the steel industry, men who work in the cooking in the catering industry. If you are always in a place where there's a lot of heat, it can also affect your fertility as well. But again, at this point, let me repeat the caveat that it's not all men who experience these things who will have fertility issues. But statistically, there's a high chance that you could end up with fertility issues if you are engaged in any of these things I've mentioned. I don't know if you have any questions. I have a lot to go to talk about.
Keep going. This is really, really educational. I'm hoping also to hear maybe something about nutrition, because I do know on some level nutrition also affects the quality of your sperm, correct?
It does. I mean, food is everything. You are what you eat. So if you are not eating the right kinds of food, and this actually ties into what I was going to talk about, which is gym. A lot of guys want to look good for the gram or for whatever purpose that they are doing, right? So there's a lot of focus on protein. Lots of guys they're eating a lot of protein because they when they eat protein, so when they take their protein shakes and they go to the gym, it helps them bulk up. And on top of that, a lot of guys are also engaging in steroid use, anabolic steroids, try and build muscles. Now, I mean, in as much as you're going to look good, all these things can indeed cause you problems in the future. Steroids in particular can actually, and no, this is real, they can actually cause your testicles to shrink. Yes.
Okay. Wow.
Yes, and obviously, if your testicles are shrinking, it means that it's reducing your capacity to actually produce sperm. So, I mean, you don't need a medical degree to know that there's going to be a problem with fertility, and that's steroids in particular. So now, if you are taking steroids and you're only focusing on proteins and you're not eating properly, you put all these things together, it's not a good combination. So you need to pay attention. I guess you can actually put this clearly and directly under the mistakes that men do that can affect them in the future. Very, very, very important. Then we have recreational drug use. Now, this is interesting. Now, almost all the recreational drugs out there, I mean, from good old tobacco, cigarettes, to marijuana, to cocaine, to everything, almost all the recreational drugs you can think about, can have effects on the quality of your sperm. It might not necessarily affect the number or the volume, but the quality of the sperm you produce can be affected. When I say quality, that's where we are talking about the two heads, the two tails, the poor motility, moving around in circles or not moving at all. Right. These recreational drugs can actually cause problems in that area, and so if you are having fertility issues, for instance, and you come to a fertility doctor, they will actually advise you to reduce or possibly stop using any of these recreational drugs, because it does interfere with fertility at some point, depending on how much of it you are taking at a time. So it's really important that we take care of some of these. We understand some of these things. Then there's one point which is not really the fault. In this case, it's not actually the fault of the man in question. There's a condition called undescended testes.
Okay.
Which is actually found in babies, boys, right? Now, in this respect, it's actually the caution goes to the parents. All parents need to pay attention to their boy child or their boy children, because when a child is born, for a lot of boys, when they are born, the test is actually not in the sac.
Right.
It's somewhere along the line. It's along the groin. We call it inguinal canal, which is the crease along the groin.
Okay.
Now, for a lot of the boys, it descends after a couple of weeks to 1 year. So if you have a boy, you need to actually inspect the sac, the scrotum, to make sure that the testicles are in there. If the testicles are not in there, don't just sit back and say that, oh, it will come. No, you need to report to the hospital so that it can be assessed properly. They might request for an ultrasound scan to locate it, so that then we can know for sure that where it's located is going to come down eventually. If we don't do all of these things and the testis does not descend, it means that testis will not be functional. Because for the same reason that the temperature reason I mentioned earlier. So the testis needs to descend into the sac for it to be able to function optimally. If it does not descend, it will not function optimally. And on top of that, it will become a source of cancer. And so you don't want the testis to stay in the wrong place. Otherwise, that child may not be able to, have children. It will not be his fault. It will be the parents' fault.
Well, that's interesting. Thank you so much for that information. Should I say information overload? Like, there's so much to learn here. Wow. I really appreciate that.
I'm just looking out for the brothers. It's very important.
Yeah, really, really important. Wow. I mean, there's so many of these things that obviously some men will take for granted. What do you think about things like environmental toxins, right? Pesticides, certain chemicals that people use. Is there any correlation at all?
Well, so there's an ongoing study. There's a lot of debate out there that the sperm count of men is actually decreasing over the years. And some of the factors or some of the attributes or the reasons why this seems to be the case is because of the environmental toxins out there. Because in today's world, we are exposed to a lot more toxins than our forefathers were exposed to. It's interesting that now that we have so much information, we actually know some of the things that are causing cancer and other things, but there are so many of them still out there, and inadvertently they end up in our food, and then we eat these things. And so prolonged exposure to these toxins will build up in your system, and it's causing problems for a lot of people, and so in as much as we have a lot, we are enlightened, and we have access to a lot more medical interventions, we are still noticing that sperm count is declining over the years, so yes, they are definitely, it's definitely part of the discussion, And so, collectively, we all need to help find ways and means of restoring the environment and avoiding the use of these, inorganic pesticides and other chemicals, so that as much as possible, it doesn't end up affecting us negatively. So yes, right. It's definitely a factor.
I think that it would be a great time to sort of, should I say, proffer solutions, or just if you can just give us steps that men can take pretty much to optimize their fertility. You've mentioned a lot, right?
Yeah.
The stress, the underwear, the medical conditions, men who work in high heat areas and stuff like that. Unfortunately, there's some men who can't avoid that. That's their 9 to 5, right? Can you offer maybe 2 or 3 solutions, that men can take to sort of improve or help some of these situations?
Well, some of the factors I mentioned earlier are recreational in their origin. So, those ones are the easiest to deal with. If you are engaged in using recreational drugs for one thing or another, you need to cut back a little bit, because the effects are there clear for all to see. So if you are abusing it, please, cut back. If you need help cutting back, there are so many resources available. You can reach out and we can find ways and means of helping you do just that, Then there are those who are also, for instance, the clothing. So instead of wearing tight-fitting underwears, please try and wear less tight fitting. One material that you should avoid, especially for long periods of time, is nylon. You shouldn't wear nylon under undergarments for prolonged periods. I mean, if you are wearing a loose nylon, pajamas to sleep, is loose. So that's the key word, loose. It's not tight, because nylon is not breathable.
Right.
So if you wear it, you actually cut out a lot of air circulation, and we need the air to circulate for the temperature to remain low. Then we have the medical aspect of things. So regular health screening is very, very important, so that if there's anything going on, we can pick it up early. Yes, your general health will contribute to your fertility. So if you are not healthy as a person, it can show in your fertility as well. So you want to pick up some good health practices like exercise and physical activity. You can never go wrong with physical activity. So pick up some physical activity. Watch what you are eating. Healthy, less processed food is always better than more processed food. What I say is that anything white, cut down on the white. So white sugar, white flour, white bread, and then move towards the less processed browner versions.
Right.
It's beneficial to you. And all these are also rich in antioxidants. So whereas a lot of the toxins in the air that you can't control, you still breathe them in anyway. But once you have a good dose of antioxidants, it helps to mop up some of these things and then keep you in the right state of health. So all these are very beneficial to you as well. Unfortunately, those that work in the high heat area, there's not much we can do from where we are sitting.
Thankfully, that's your job.
Oh, well, that's one way. But thankfully, there are occupational health interventions that try to minimize the impact. So some of them do like a cycle where they go on for about 2-3 hours, and then they go off for another batch to come in and work, and then they come back to take over. I mean, there are ways and means of dealing with it, because like I said, there are men who have been doing this for a long time, and they still manage to have their children. So it's possible to go through, continue with the job, and still have your family put together.
Right. Thank you so much, Doc, for your time. Really appreciate it. I think you've done some really good justice to this topic. And guys, if you're watching this video, listen, there are so many questions that you can ask Dr. Kelvin. Just search for him. He's actually on YouTube. You can find him on Instagram as well. Same handle, at Kelvin Owusu MD, and it's on the screen below. Check him out. Ask him any questions, or better yet, just drop some of your questions in the comments below. I'll get him to come back and answer a few. Okay. All right. So Doc, thank you once again so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Jessica.
And if you enjoyed this kind of content, the instructions are simple. Like, subscribe to the channel for more, and we'll definitely be bringing Doc back for some other exciting topics. My name is Jessica. Thank you so much for watching. Cheers.